where do you find God? Almost sounds like a loaded question, doesn't it? I mean, if God was someone you could find, wouldn't everyone be out searching? Well, rather than looking for something elusive, like a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, I reckon it's more about learning to recognise the way God is already present to us in our everyday lives. I'm Lizzie Oakes, and this is Where Do You Find God? My guest on the podcast today is Matt Badger. Now, Matt is Senior Pastor, Corp Officer at the Salvation Army in Johnsonville, and Matt has been part of the Sallies since 1998 in various roles. Matt is also the co-author of When the Light Goes Out, a book he wrote alongside his wife, Jules. When the Light Goes Out details the dangers and pitfalls of unresolved grief and depression within the context of Christian leadership. Kia ora, Matt. Welcome to Where Do You Find God?
Kia ora. Yeah, thank you, Lizzie. Lovely to chat.
It was a while ago that I spoke with you guys on my radio show about your book and booked in Jules quite quickly, I think, for the podcast. Your name's been on my long list, so I'm so glad that we've managed to reconnect again today. What sort of feedback have you had to that amazing book?
I explain the book as it's a bit like an ongoing adventure. I meet people now most weeks who have either had it recommended to them or have read it. The way in which we wrote it is we wanted people to be able to see themselves in the story as they read. And you go to a very deep place with people very quickly who have read it. So it's taken on a life of its own. It is now available on Kindle and Amazon and all those places. But it is genuinely our heart for the book that people who might need to do some of the deeper work under the surface in life, that maybe this could be something that might point them in the right direction to help do that. Yeah.
So, Matt, in Acts chapter 17, verse 27, it says, God intended that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he be not far from each one of us. So my question for you today, Matt, is where do you find God?
For me, where I find God is primarily linked to another question, which is what is the primary purpose of the Christian life? And the primary purpose, I believe, because people go, it's preaching or teaching or bringing others to Christ or hanging out in community or serving the poor, social justice, all those kinds of things. Whereas I believe that the primary purpose of our faith is to live a spirit-filled life, walk in step with the Spirit, and everything that we do should flow out of that, right? So it's that classic Romans passage that says, those who live according to their flesh have their mind set on what the flesh desires, but those who live in accordance with the Spirit have their minds on what the Spirit desires. And so what that looks like to me every day is, Lizzie, I start my days in my room by myself, and I simply ask the question, God, what are you up to today? Help me to partner with you and help me to bring your presence into that space, right? The idea of prayer is very important to me, especially prayer by myself in my room, where the classic Matthew 6, Jesus says, when you pray, go into your room, close your door. I take that very, very literally. And so praying for divine opportunities every day sort of comes out of that space. And then it's amazing because I meet people most days where I go, I had a feeling I'd meet you today, even though you had no idea that we'd be meeting, but it's God that's setting up the divine opportunities.
Yeah. So you're making space in your life every day to connect with him, and then that helps you in turn connect with others.
Correct. And I've learnt that divine opportunities often means divine interruptions. And so that's how God works. And so I think when you're in tune with the Spirit, you just start to know things sometimes that you just go, there's something bigger going on. And that's what I live for. I love that kind of thing. The other place I really find God, it's actually in the process of exegesis. That's the process of looking at the word, going back to the original languages, trying to figure out what the original intended audience, what the message was for them, and then trying to figure out what it means for us today. And then taking this and aligning it with historical sources and history. Oh my goodness, it just consistently blows me away how the fingerprints of God are all over the Bible that we have. Because for me, I think in pictures, context is very, very important. People get sick and tired of me saying that I went to the British Museum. A few years ago, I had the privilege of going and living in the UK for a while, and my lovely wife says to me, write down a list of what you want to do in the UK while you're there. And what I didn't realise was I'd written down the names of 5 artefacts that I wanted to go and see in the British Museum. And Jill said to me, that's not normal, because it wasn't the Tower of London or anything like that. The question is, where do I find God? Is that I'm in a place like that, looking at the Stele of Cyrus or the Black Obelisk or the Rosetta Stone, all of these things, and just going, oh my goodness, I just see God at work, because there's so much about what happens that aligns nicely with Scripture and confirms the Bible that we read. And
there's so much depth to that. I'm just thinking, gee, what's it like coming to your church and hearing one of your sermons?
Yeah. So apparently, there are what I call varied views on that, Lizzie. I'll put it out there. Some love it, and some find it a bit of a stretch. Yes, but But I like to think that the heart of it, though, is helping people have confidence in the Bible that we have. They encouraged to walk with the Spirit.
Maybe you need a podcast, because I'm a Bible reader and I read it and often feel I'm not getting this. There's a whole bunch going on here and I am just one-dimensional, and I know there's other dimensions, which is what you're actually explaining. Hey, I'd just like to take you back for a second, Matt. We touched on your book that you wrote with your wife, When the Light Goes Out, and it's really through a period of Jules going through very extreme mental distress, isn't it? And I think even in the book she went off somewhere and had to have support away from the family, you and your children. How was that experience for you in terms of where was God for you in that?
That's a great question. What happened with my lovely wife was I married a high-functioning individual. And so she was very good at masking what was going on below the surface. And every now and again I'd think, there's something not quite right. But then she would just, cover her tracks in a very, very clever way, my lovely wife. So it got to a point where then she collapsed effectively, and very quickly, within the period of a few days, our whole life was turned upside down. While that was going on, in my role as a pastor at the time, there was a whole lot of stressful things also going on within the context of church leadership and the whole thing. And looking back about it now, I found that there were a number of what I called new covenants that I made with God along the way. And because the weird thing, and it's very hard to explain to people, but right through the process, while things were hard, for me below the surface, deep down, I had an ongoing sense of peace. And I knew that God was actually with us in that dark valley. That's the only way I can explain it. I think it flows out of these practices that we have, that the scriptures talk about being part of the vine, making sure that you are connected, abide in me, he abides in us. And I think when the rubber hit the road, it worked. That's how I explain it. And not that it was without pain, because it wasn't. There was a lot of pain in the process. Sometimes uncertainty, but there was just this really weird sense of peace at the base of it all for myself. Yeah.
It's wonderful. Matt, this God that you've talked about that you find through Scripture and history, and a God of peace that was there for you when your wife went through a period of great mental distress. I know you described God as being peace, but how else would you describe that God?
Oh my goodness. Apart from the fact of being so completely mind-blowing, seriously, one of the things we often talk about in Christian circles is that we serve a God who is outside time. And we know this because of the way that prophecy works in the Bible. So the scripture lets us in on things that haven't yet happened. And to me, that's it's what Jordan Peterson calls the hyperlinked Bible, right? There's this where one part of the Bible refers to another part of the Bible and the whole thing. So when we talk about this God, I find him completely and amazingly overwhelming. There's nowhere we can go. There is nowhere we have been. There's no plans that we can come up with that he's not already one step ahead of us. And so the nature of our universe, the world of physics, the whole thing, our interdimensional reality, this is what does my head in every day, Lizzie, right? Where do I find God? I find God I'm just blown away. The older I get, Lizzie, the more confidence I have in the foundations of the Christian faith. But actually, more and more, I am convinced that Jesus is who he says he was, right? God, by his Spirit, is interested in us every day, but it's up to us to kind of align ourselves to him. And I think thinking about that process, because I'm a head guy, I think about these things all the time. That it's through the stuff that's where I find God.
Yeah, that's great. Matt Badger, thank you for joining me today on Where Do You Find God?
You're more than welcome. Thank you for listening.
Tune in every Wednesday afternoon at 4:30 on Sanctuary, or listen and subscribe via your favourite podcast platform and give us a review so others can find us.